You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong, all on Georgia Radio Network.
Welcome to episode 74 of the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast. I'm Dave Roberts. With me, she's got brains, she's got beauty. She is the driving force behind this show, Jessica Szilagyi.
Hey Dave, nice intro.
you like that one?
Mixing it up. We're short on time, so that's
we
why
we are short on time. We are short on time. I hope you had a great week.
I did. Did you?
I did. I spent most of that week reading articles from you because you've been firing them out like an M60.
The more the merrier. It's Christmas all year long at All in Georgia.
It is. And your friends, and I put air quotes around friends, who wanted you to violate Georgia law after poking Chris Carr with a stick. That was awesome.
Yes. I'm not going to be purposely or intentionally violating laws, especially the ones I post about on Facebook, because
you're not stupid.
That's right. That's right.
We have got a great show. It's going to be a little long show this week, but really great guests. And we want to remind everybody, guests included, these are our opinions and our guest opinions, not necessarily those of All on Georgia or any other rational person. Our topic this week is bail reform. It's been a hot topic lately, and we've got folks from both sides of the issue.
I'm excited about it. I was doing research, and I followed what's going on in different cities. We hear talking points. I'll read an article here and there, but I'm definitely not an expert on it. So I'm really excited about hearing the two different perspectives, but doing the research for the show prep was interesting. Like, I don't think most people know anything about the bail industry unless they've had to use it or know someone who's had to use it.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing that we get to is we're going to hear different opinions and two totally different sides of the issue, and we're going to endeavor to do this in the most respectful way possible, to have differing opinions and hopefully act as a beacon for people who disagree on political issues.
Well, I was thinking, because we talked about that, especially having two people on in the same week, that we really wanted to adhere to that. And I think that we're queuing it up, that this show is probably going to be in some sort of book or series or documentary on how to do this.
Or how not to. So we're going to get right into it with our first guests. Hope you guys enjoy. So in our theme of being on both sides of every issue, we're going to start off with Marc Hyden of the R Street Institute. Marc recently penned a column on All on Georgia, some website somewhere, called Georgia Must Cement Bail Reform Process. That got a little bit of laugh out of Jessica.
Yeah, you slaughtered the title doing it.
I did.
That's why you shouldn't be snarky. Just let it be. I am excited Marc is with us because I have been following I've kind of followed him from his past organization, which he's going to tell us about, to this one, and I just love the work he does. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. And Dave, I am fluent in snark and sarcasm, so I know exactly where you're going with that. No, thank you so much for having me here, for letting me ride on All on Georgia. It's a real privilege.
Tell us a little bit about your background, what you do at R Street, what are some of the issues you've been working on in addition to bail reform.
Well, the R Street Institute is by far the coolest think tank out there, and I am not biased in any way, shape, or form. It's a free market think tank. We support limited, effective government in many areas. That extends, obviously, to criminal justice reform, but we also touch on property and casualty insurance. We do occupational licensing. We do autonomous vehicles, harm reduction, and many other issues. So likely, even if you're not a free marketeer, you're probably going to find an issue that we work on that you find pretty interesting. interesting. And I started here a little over a year ago. It's been a fantastic experience. I head up all state government affairs, and we have people spread out across the United States embedded in different state capitals, and we're trying to make a difference at the local level.
Awesome.
Well, I think you'll find in our audience, you're going to find a lot of free marketeers.
I'd imagine I would.
Well, it's hard being right all the time, but, somebody has to be doing it. So.
Yeah, we've been accused of being an echo chamber.
Perfect. I'm still trying to find a time when me and Jessica disagree on something. That's going to be a great moment.
Yes.
You don't want to do that.
No, I'm going to refuse to come on your podcast.
That's funny. Well, we were talking about bail reform this week, and you wrote this column talking about some of the progress that we've made at the state level and what the cities are doing in different places. We I don't think are as progressive as most states. Especially in the Southeast. But tell us a little bit about your position, our street's position on bail reform, and why that's the free market approach to it.
Well, the way we have it right now, and this is similar to the way it works across the United States, the cash bail system essentially criminalizes poverty. It leads to more crime. It imperils defendants, and it vastly increases the taxpayer burden. Now, in theory, it sounds like it should work right. Bail is meant to be leveraged to ensure that people, after they've been arrested, will show up to their day in court. But we have many of these negative effects that stem from this system. And one person kind of sticks out to me. This is not a Georgia case. I believe it was in New Jersey. A man by the name of Vishnu Fagu. He was arrested for a pretty brutal crime, the murder of his sister. They set bail for him at $750,000. Well, he couldn't afford the bail. His family couldn't afford it either. So he had to sit in jail for 3 long years as the taxpayers paid for his time there. Meanwhile, of course, he couldn't work, so that put more distress on his family. Well, eventually, 3 years later, he got his day in court. He was not guilty, and they released him. And that should be a success story to some degree. At least he got his day in court. But, he hadn't spent much time with his daughter in those 3 years. I'm sure he lost his job. But something interesting happened. 11 months later, he was rearrested. But this time he was guilty for biting and kicking someone. So the question I hear when we talk about Vishnu Fagu is, was he naturally violent? It doesn't seem that he was. It seems like something else was at play here, and science tells us that the longer you're in jail, whether you're guilty or innocent, whether you're accused of a major crime or a minor crime, the likelihood that you are rearrested after you're released goes up exponentially. And we want to have our street supports a system that's just, it's fair, it's equitable, and doesn't lead to harmful outcomes unnecessarily, doesn't lead to increased taxpayer burdens, and doesn't lead to more crime. And that's why I think it's really important that we look at reforming the bail system.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the progress that you've supported in Georgia? I know that it kind of happened as you were getting going with our street, and then some lawmakers have already tried to backpedal on it, but talk about the progress that we've made and then what else needs to happen so that we can get to a point where we're not criminalizing poverty.
Yeah, of course. And Americans overwhelmingly support bail reform. 74% was the last statistics I saw. So this is a winning issue. If any politicians are listening, bail reform is good for business or good for your business. There's a lot going on being considered and that has already been enacted. Of course, we know Nathan Deal, his last kind of landmark reform was reforming the bail system. And it was a step in the right direction, but it kind of lacked any teeth. Essentially, it says judges must take into consideration defendants' resources before setting bail. Well, that's it. They have to consider it. That doesn't really mean they have to do anything about it. There's nothing to force them to reduce bail. Thankfully, many judges are doing the right thing, but I don't know if that's clear across the board. But what I find really exciting, and this is just a great thing about local government, and you can't see me right now, but I've got a big grin because I love seeing local governments take the bull by the horns when the state comes up short. Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, I'm sure she and I do not agree on a whole lot of stuff, but essentially she signed an ordinance eliminating cash bail for petty offenses. Athens Clarke County did this recently. New Orleans did. Orange County, Florida effectively does this too. And the whole state of California effectively abolished cash bail for petty crimes. This moves us into a much better system. I don't see any reason why someone arrested for a petty crime should have to stay in jail for months to possibly a year if they have a low-risk profile. It helps nobody. It doesn't help them. It doesn't help the taxpayers. But there's a few other ways that I think that we can address it beyond this. Mecklenburg, North Carolina is a big success story because they adopted an assessment tool. So after someone is arrested, they run this sophisticated tool to see if they're a flight risk, to see if they're at risk of harassing any witnesses, and so forth. And if they're a low risk, oftentimes they just release them. No cash bail, released on their own recognizance. And the results have been overwhelmingly positive. The court appearance rates didn't drop, at least not significantly. And defendants that have been released have not been charged at a higher rate of new crimes. So I think this shows that we can achieve some common good here, essentially by shrinking government, which that shouldn't be news to either one of you.
Well, and I had this discussion with an Atlanta police captain who just happens to be a customer, and while I'm fiddling with his air conditioner, we're just chatting, and I asked him about bail reform. And his point was his officers are much less likely to arrest somebody because they know they're going to be back on the street immediately. In his particular area, he has a lot of dinks, double income, no kids sort of area, where they will call the police on somebody standing in the corner selling drugs that they assume is selling drugs. And of course, the people get angry at the police officers because they're back on the corner in an hour because there's no bail. There's a certain amount of frustration, and I know from law enforcement on that aspect. Now, I think the three of us could agree that I don't think that drugs should be illegal. That's beside the point. Is the officers don't have any motivation to actually arrest anybody because there's just no need to. The guy's gonna be back on the street in an hour and not show up for court.
Well, there's a lot wrong with that, to be perfectly honest. It sounds like, and I don't want to put words in your friend's mouth, but it sounds like he wants people to stay in jail and he wants them to not make bail. That's not the role. That shouldn't be what he wants. And I can point to a few reasons why that's bad. I mean, people that stay in jail for 24 hours, just over 24 hours, are 17% likelier to reoffend than people who are released within 24 hours. But that keeps going up. If they can't afford bail and they stay in jail for upwards of 2 weeks, they're 51% likely to be rearrested. So he should want people to be released back out so that they can go back to work, so they won't lose their job and lose their family, because that's what happens. And he should also be worried about the cost. I mean, last numbers I saw were there was 39,000 people in local jails across Georgia. Probably right now there are 39,000 or so, and it costs $1,000 per person to house them per month, and that doesn't include correction salaries. This is just housing, food, medication. So all combined, that means that's about a $500 million bill to Georgia taxpayers every year. I would think the sheriff that you're talking to would like to lower the taxpayer burden and not have to pay for this. But another point I'd like to make on that, it sounds like he supports overcriminalization. I think if we're talking about low-risk, nonviolent individuals, perhaps leaving them in jail to languish for an indefinite period of time is probably not the best place for them. And then my last point I'll make on this after I get off my soapbox is that 60% of people in jail have mental health problems. So they need to be in the hospital. They need to be with their loved ones. They need to be elsewhere because jail is not a hospital and they will not get the care they need. So I would respectfully disagree with essentially everything your friend said.
Well, no, that's good. That's the name of the podcast is Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong. and we've been accused of being an echo chamber, and
well, that's because we're not the ones that are wrong, but but I think you brought up a really good point, and I think it's one of the, if you've ever, I mean, most people can acknowledge this fact, but I think especially if you try to write an article about any type of any part of the justice system, you find that it's so all intertwined that it's hard to stay on topic. Like, you have to keep it short, because if you're talking about bail reform, you've got to stay focused. Otherwise, you end up talking about, judges who use too much discretion. And then when judges have not enough discretion and they're using mandatory bail amounts and mandatory minimums and the overcriminalization, like, it's this mega massive system that is so broken across the board. So you really do have to stay hyper focused on each individual issue. Otherwise, you can't fix anything. And so, like, when I was doing research on this for the show, it really got me thinking about bail practices in general. And I'm thinking, like, yes, the trend is to go towards petty nonviolent offenses, but there really are some offenses that are maybe more serious that I would still think that someone shouldn't sit in jail for years on end, simply because, like you said, they have so much to lose if the court has it wrong, first of all. And second of all, let's say that someone does sit in prison or in jail for 3 years and they finally get their sentence and they're guilty, but they get credit for time served, so now they're going home. Like, we have this focus on the system is just right, and so there's no need to adjust for when it's not, or to be compassionate about the injustices. And that gets lost because there's so many problems, and I don't know, I feel like I'm jumping down a bunch of rabbit holes all at once here, but I think it's hard to stay focused on each individual issue, because if you open the door just slightly and let any more light in, you're exposing another justice-related issue.
Oh, yeah, they're all intertwined in some very overt ways. And then just to go back, because I couldn't help but think more when, Jessica, when you were talking, and Dave, the question that you gave me, another reason that the sheriff should want to get people out of jail that don't belong there is that people in local jails who have not yet been convicted have a disturbing suicide rate. It's 7 times higher than people who have already been convicted. So this is not a good place to spend extended periods of time. And the longer they're in there, we found that prosecutors, and let me stop for a second. My dad is a former cop. He was a prosecutor. Now he's a defense attorney. So I'm not trying to point my finger and wag it at anyone here. But prosecutors are smart, and they know that if someone's in jail and they can't make bail, they're likely to be willing to plea bargain and just plead out. And we find that people do that time and time again, and sometimes they have pretty good cases of innocence. And some people have said, I was innocent, I just wanted to get out of jail. And that is absolutely terrifying, that we have a system that you can use that kind of leverage to get people to plead out to something that they didn't actually do.
Now, where do we get to the Eighth Amendment argument? Because excessive is the word. Excessive bail should not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. So where do we get to excessive, and how do we figure out what's excessive for each defendant, or there's no set number of what excessive is?
Yeah, and I think this debate's been going on since essentially the Constitution was written. So my answer probably won't be very good, but I think you can look at some state constitutions and see the direction that they're going, and you could probably use that as a guide. In North Carolina, they're not supposed to use cash bail unless it's absolutely necessary for public safety. And I think that's why you see Mecklenburg, North Carolina, moving away from it. I think that should be the metric. If it's not necessary for public safety, there's a low risk profile that we shouldn't be doing it. Then I think you probably can make a case for it being excessive. So that is my way of not actually answering your question.
When you get pushback on this, though, how do they fall? How do the decks fall? I mean, we all know that sheriff's associations, obviously the bail industry, they're against it, but partisan wise, rural areas, when you consider those, like, what's the breakdown? I mean, do they play party politics with this?
I haven't seen that. I talk with people on the left and the right. I'm in the Gold Dome pretty regularly. I'll be there tomorrow, actually. And I find hunger from both sides to reform the system. And, it's not a D, it's not an R thing. And I can point to California. They had one of the worst justice systems for ages. And it was only recently that they actually addressed bail reform. And they've been ruled by Democrats for years. And the same can be said about Georgia. We didn't touch it for years, and we were supermajority Republican controlled. But now I think both sides are seeing just how bad this is, and we're trying to move in a better direction. And it gives me a little bit of hope, because for a while I was worried that the American political system might have been irrevocably broken. But this proves that the left and right can actually work together and accomplish positive outcomes.
I think that is true so long as you keep the partisan, you really got to make a bipartisan push. Your organizations that are pushing it can't be partisan. You've got to, it's got to be bipartisan from each policy position's get-go, if that makes sense. So that there's no one's taking sides, because we're so divided right now.
No, I agree, and I think it should be bipartisan, and I try to pick issues that I think the left and the right can actually coordinate on from day one, whether it's drafting the legislation together or just building broader coalitions. I think that's necessary. But the biggest pushback that I've seen on bail reform has actually been misinformation from different individuals. Some within the Gold Dome, some of them work in specific industries that I'm not going to name, but spreading misinformation about what bail reform really is. I've heard lies about, you're releasing murderers. Well, no, we're actually mostly talking about low-risk, non-violent misdemeanors in which there is effectively no risk. So it's important to understand what these measures do in different states, and I think we should build off of them.
And I might even argue, even with someone who's accused of murder, he has not had his day in court.
Sure. No, absolutely. 75% of people in local jails have not been convicted yet. So there is a presumption of innocence, and if we are going to adhere to that, I think that is an issue that should be central to the bail reform debate.
So if you could articulate, are there any downfalls of this? I understand that you're saying that the opponents have a lot of misinformation sometimes, or even if it's not misinformation, it operates on a system of fear, which is a lot of how we get a lot of legislation, and how I think our government gets away with a lot of things justice related. They work on emotion and fear and telling people we're protecting them. But are there any downfalls of getting rid of cash bail? Is it a slippery slope? Is it? Because like I said, when I started doing research, I was like, well, this should go way beyond petty crimes. I'm already jumping to involuntary manslaughter and child porn and, insider trading. I'm like, let them all go. Let them work. Let them be productive until you convict them.
Well, one of the arguments I've seen, there's a few news articles about this. So when Atlanta moved into that system where a lot of the petty crimes, petty misdemeanors, the nonviolent kinds, were no longer eligible for bail. They would just waive it and you'd be released. I saw a couple news articles saying that the court appearance rate wasn't as good after this. That immediately brought out a little bit of opposition. They're pointing to saying, see, this is what happens when you don't have bail. You lose that leverage. But that's not what we found in North Carolina. And I want to point out, just since I work with a lot of economists and I try to play one sometimes, although very poorly, Atlanta supposedly has had a small increase of some sort, but they haven't had this long enough to actually have any sort of conclusion on it. The sample size is so small, so we don't know if this is a trend. We don't know if it's an anomaly. But one thing that has to be pointed out is this coincided with the Atlanta ransomware attack, in which we couldn't use databases and computers. We were back to the Stone Age, where we had, not quite the Stone Age. We at least had pen and paper, but still that kind of shrouds everything in a bit of uncertainty. So we need to give it more time, see how it works out. But the way I would respond is, even if marginally fewer defendants that are accused of petty crimes return to court, so even if there's a marginal step backward here, and I'm not saying that's the case, is that a good enough reason to return to the old ways, which lead to more crime, destroy lives, and cost ridiculous amounts of money? Of course not.
Well, to me, it's the same argument of you'd rather let one guilty person one guilty person go than put an innocent person away. It's the same premise. Like, if overall the system is better, there's going to be flaws. What's the trade-off?
Sure. I mean, I'm a big supporter of Blackstonian philosophy, which you just quoted, and I think it applies here as well.
Well, and I have heard stories of someone who can't make bail sitting in jail for months, and the charges being dismissed. He never got his day in court. They just dropped the charges, and it's essentially the government gets to say, okay, well, no harm, no foul. Go back to your life. And at this point, he's been accused of a crime, lost his job, strained his relationship with his family, and there's no resolution. There's not even an opportunity to go to court and have yourself found not guilty. It is, okay, well, it turns out we don't have the evidence. Go home now.
Yeah, and good luck getting some of your life back. That time, you're not going to be able to recoup that. And one of the things that we have mentioned as an option, so if some localities are not fine with eliminating cash bail for petty offenses, there are other options here that are at least less harmful than the current system. And one is pre-trial work release. We have work release for people who've been convicted so that they don't lose their homes and their families and their cars and their livelihoods. We could do pre-trial work release. If they are a low-risk profile, why can't they go to work every day and then come back if that's really what you want? I mean, my preference is eliminating cash bail in cases in which it's not absolutely necessary, but if we want to talk other options for places that haven't reached that conclusion yet, we have other options that would be at least less harmful.
Well, and I will bring this up later when we get on the other side of the issue, but with technology now, Google knows where I am. As far as tracking people, we don't have to keep people in a cage to know where they are anymore.
That's true. I mean, there's many options. Technology is fascinating, how far it's advancing, and I'm a little terrified about what Google knows about me. But that's probably the topic of a different podcast. But the point you make is very clear. There are other ways of keeping up with people rather than letting them sit in a cage and rot. We have to remember these people. They're humans. They're like us. They may be wrongly accused of these crimes. They may have committed some of these crimes, but again, they may be minor crimes. They don't deserve, in many cases, what they get. And again, I want to keep pointing out that 75% of the people that are in jail have not been convicted of the offense for which they're there. And 50% of those who are in jail have never been convicted of anything in their life. So we need to remember what these people are, humans, and we need to treat them as such, and we need to make sure that we have a system in place that doesn't continue to create this harm and increase recidivism rates and essentially lead to tax increases on three of us.
Well, we acknowledge PTSD when it comes to deployed service members, but there has to be some of that when your life changes completely from being in a nice, comfortable home to being accused of a crime and thrown into oftentimes an overcrowded cell block and treated like an animal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a large reason, that in part is a large reason why we see recidivism rates go up, or rearrest rates, I should say, go up for those who spend more than 24 hours in local jails. It's really traumatizing. It's terrifying. I haven't gone through this experience, thank God, and I never want to, and I don't know what that would do to me. I am friends with people who have been wrongly convicted and even done time in prison as opposed to just local jails, but they were there as well. And it's traumatizing. It's not just losing your home. Once you're released, you're going back into a different society from which you were just in. And I believe there has to be a degree of PTSD. I mean, I've heard the terrifying stories of what happens in local jails and as well as prison. And that stays with you. You're probably going to need a little bit more than therapy to be able to reintegrate into society. And I think that if the state is supposed to be the steward of these individuals, when they're in their care, that they have some responsibility to ensure that they can reintegrate safely and they're not being harmed on a regular basis, like we see with the cash bail system and many other issues related to criminal justice.
Well, and I think, it's not just the people who stand to lose from changes that we seek to make. There's misinformation across the board because of the media, because of just how the system is set up, sometimes by design, just the way we campaign, politics, everything. The biggest or the most important aspect of this is educating the public, and not just on bail reform, but on issues across the board. And so, your organization does a lot of education, not just advocacy, but education, and you put out a lot of good information. So can you tell people where they can find you, where they can learn more about what you guys are doing, following you, all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Go to rstreet.org. That's our homepage. You'll be able to find all the different criminal justice work we do and all the other exciting policy studies. We're doing some really cutting-edge stuff, and I'm really proud to play a very small role in that. If anyone wants to send me any fan mail, mhyden at rstreet.org. I appreciate that. No hate mail, preferably. And, of course, we're very active on Twitter and Facebook, so you can see the wonderful Senator Shoshana running our Twitter page. It's hilarious to say the very least.
You fit in very well here, because I instituted a rule not that long ago that said if you have any constructive criticism or other criticism, you have to limit it to 3 points per week. So the fact that you said, no hate mail, just the fans, you came to the right place to share your opinions this week. So
I appreciate it.
We really enjoyed having you on. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you.
Coming on the other side of the issue, we have joining us Tracy Gonzalez, a veteran bail agent, bail company owner, as well as managing general agent for Palmetto Surety Corporation. I really should read this stuff before I try to read it on the show, because I'm just an awful human being. Words are hard. Tracy is an avid believer in commercial bail industry and the role it plays in ensuring our public safety.
And she's my friend.
Oh,
God
yes,
help
I
her.
am. Yes, I am.
And that comes without air quotes.
Yes.
Usually when I refer to Jessica's friends, I put air quotes around them.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I saw you do it, though. I can imagine you doing it. Y'all, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here tonight.
Yes, we're excited you're here to offer a little bit of a different perspective that I don't think neither Dave nor I have had, or probably most of our listeners. So,
well, good. Time to educate.
Before we get into the actual heart of the issue, can you share with us what exactly you do? What a normal day is like. What is your responsibility, and how do you play into the day-to-day bail industry?
I don't know that in the last 20 years I've ever had a normal day, per se. We don't have normal days as bail agents. I haven't slept. My famous saying is I haven't slept a full night in 20 years because my phone rings. So we are the first line of contact normally for someone once they are arrested and taken to the jail. We get the call, and we begin making arrangements with family, financial arrangements for our defendant in order to help them procure their release from jail. So, that's where we come into the picture. We facilitate release for our defendants.
Well, that leads us into a very good question, because I've never been arrested. I've actually bailed somebody out, because that's what guys do for each other.
That's right. That's right. You didn't call me.
Well, I was.
You're kind of far.
Yeah.
Love it.
For those of us who haven't been arrested, can you explain how the bond works through a company if you can't afford the cash bond?
Sure. In the state of Georgia, we have two bonds when someone's arrested. You have a cash bond and a property bond. Because Georgia is a property state in relation to bail, which is a whole nother story, we're required to post the property bond. In some counties, we may have property posted. In some counties, we may have surety posted. In some counties, we have cash escrow account posted. So we post the property bond at normally 10 to 15% of the property bond. Georgia is a 15% state, so we can charge up to 15%. I'm blonde and I'm not real good with numbers, so usually 10% is my my going rate, because it's just easy for me to figure it at 2 a.m. when I'm asleep. So that's what we do. We post that bail to the court, and we ensure the defendants return to court for disposition of their case. So that's how it works.
Now, what is the requirement for somebody, just having collateral, is that sufficient? Or what are the parameters of somebody being able to use a private bonding company?
Well, it depends on the scenario. Different cases require different things. I always require a cosigner, an indemnitor, as I call them. The reason is, and I like to tie in family members, because that's that family, that mother, that grandmother, that aunt, that uncle, that wife, that baby mama, as they say. I tie those people in. That's our circle of love. That's their support system. So the more family members I can tie in, the more I can ensure that they're going to help me make sure this person returns for their court date. So I always require an indemnitor, number one. Depending on the charges and the amount of the bail, we do require collateral in some cases. Collateral can be, we do cash collateral. We do property, different things. I don't do car. I get a lot of people that call me and say, I've got a 1962 Volkswagen Beetle. It doesn't run, but I could bring you the title. No, I'm sorry, we can't do that. So I don't do jewelry and things like that. Listen, I'm not a pawn shop, but property, cash collateral, depending on the charges and the amount of the bond.
And do you tell people no?
I do. I'm the queen of no.
So,
my agents get really mad at me sometimes because they get really excited, and then I say no, and they're like, ugh.
No. As a married guy, I know the queen of no.
Yeah. No. I am the queen of no. Trust me.
So where I'm going with this question is, are there people who might reach out to a bail bondsman or somebody and they can't, no one will help them? Does that happen?
Yes.
Because I think there's I think there's this belief that family pulls up to the jail and across the street are two buildings for bail, and they think that they can just go over there and those people will help them and then they'll get their person out. That's not how it works.
No, that is not how it works. We look at a variety of things. We look at a person's arrest history. I look at whether they've ever had a failure to appear, which is very important to me. I will not bail someone that has had a history of failure to appear. Why? Because history is a huge indicator of what's going to happen in the future. If they fail to appear once, they're going to do it again. That's a no. It's an automatic no. Somebody that's had 12 DUIs, listen, you're not learning your lesson. You need help. Do we work with people and get them help? Absolutely, every day. But yes, I do say no. Just depends on the circumstances.
So when would you say, because you've been in the industry for a while now, when would you say that there was a trend that was noticeable to you to start reforming the system of bail?
It's been in the rumblings and the inner workings for, I don't know, probably 10 years or so. You've been hearing, they're going to get rid of bail. Bail agents are horrible people. Bail discriminates against people that are poor and people of color. But really and truly, it seems like to me in the last 4 years, I've seen a bigger, faster trend to reform the bail system.
And why are you against bail reform? Or cash bail reform from, you've been vocal in not just Georgia.
No, I'm nationwide. I speak out nationally. Here's why, and there's a lot of different reasons. I could keep you on here for hours and you'd be asleep. But let me tell you, bail works. Commercial bail works. Number one, we ensure public safety. Okay? They say that people are languishing in jail because they can't afford it. That's not true. There was a recent study done by Dr. David Krall from University of Tampa. And let me tell you, he studied thousands of pretrial cases. And he found what we've been saying for years, that the people that are purported to be stuck in jail are there for a variety of reasons, not just because they can't afford bail. FTAs, they have probation holds. Their family refuses to indemnify their bond for whatever reason. And listen, their family knows them better than anybody. If mom says to me, I am not signing that bail, I'm not getting him out. You know, and this doctor says that the data simply doesn't support the claim. People are not in jail because they can't afford bail.
Now, you can be falsely accused and be a scumbag and your mom will not love you.
Absolutely. Listen, and you know, Jessica knows I say every day, bad things happen to good people every day. Every day. Do I see people that I believe have been accused and are probably innocent? Yes, I do. But that's not in my realm of what I do. I'm not a judge nor a jury. I'm simply there to facilitate their release. We're accountable to the court and we ensure their return.
Oh no, it wasn't a statement pointed at you, but at the system itself, saying, you know, we're gonna, as I did for the last guest, excessive bail should not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. The Eighth Amendment.
But by excessive,
right? That's the key word.
There is your key word. So let me tell you what I think about that. That's why it's so important that they review bail schedules regularly.
What is regularly?
Regularly, I think they should be reviewed every year. Mm-hmm. I don't know how, listen, misdemeanor bail schedules are set by state court judges. Yeah, I don't know how they do a lot of that. That's not what I do. I write bail. I don't set bail schedules. But I can tell you that by excessive, that doesn't mean affordable. Okay? The U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit has already ruled. They've ruled already and said there is no such thing as affordable bail so long as there is a prompt review of bail within 48 hours.
Well, and excessive is going to be different for me than it is for, you know, Bernie Marcus.
Right.
You can't define excessive.
Right. If I get popped, I can afford to put 10,000 down. Bernie can afford to put 10 billion down. But if you're a homeless guy who's accused of taking a leak in public,
I know where you're going with that.
$100 may be excessive because you don't have it. And
it could be. It could be excessive.
And you don't have the property. You're a homeless guy. I mean, obviously, if you had family that loves you, you wouldn't be homeless. So there's nobody to sign for that bail. So you're going to sit until the prosecutor gets around to you.
You know, but I need someone to explain to me where that makes commercial bail at fault. How does that make us at fault?
So
It doesn't.
No, I agree. It does not. You're not to. The commercial bail industry is not to blame for somebody sitting in jail it's usually because the system is backed up and they're slow or they prioritize and go with the high publicity stuff or the slam dunks. But I want to back up just a little bit because I think I've seen you engage with people on social media. I've seen some of the videos you've put out and things like that. I think you do a good job balancing the conversation of, sure, I am against this because it would affect my livelihood. However, you're not just, like, this isn't just a money thing for you. You actually believe in the public safety aspect. But I do, this is a question that I do wonder, because you are somebody who is respectful of, you know, government resources, taxpayer funds. Like, at what point do you, and I understand that this isn't the exact role of your industry, but at what point does the trade-off come into play for you of it being efficient for taxpayers? Because if you look at we're using a simple public drunkenness thing here, but he wouldn't be able to get bond with anybody because he has no resources. But if he sits there for 3 months and we're paying for everything, was that really worth it? And I agree that the law should be different and the system should be different. But at what point, how should we handle those types of ridiculousness that are clearly not taxpayer friendly?
Listen, I don't know what the solution for those cases are, but I can tell you this. 2 things. First of all, I work with people every day. I work with people that don't have resources. I work with people that are ill, that are incarcerated. not everything that I do and not everything that our bail agents in this industry do is about money. Okay? We're humans. We're moms. We're dads. We're grandmothers. We're employment counselors. We're social workers. I've taken diapers and formula to the jail at 2 a.m. Not everything is about money. We help people every day. We help people get into rehab. We help them change their lives. Would I help somebody in that situation? Probably so, because the reality of that is a $100 fine. If I help him and he gets out and he doesn't come back to court, it's $100. Okay, I'm going to pay $100. But here's the reality of this. On the flip side of the taxpayer, if we reform commercial bail, then the taxpayer is going to become responsible for bearing that cost. How? In so many ways. If you're holding people, you're jailing people for not paying fines and fees, that's wrong. I don't agree with that. Again, that's out of my realm. Again, that costs the taxpayer money. If people are failing to appear on pretrial services, listen, anything to me, and this is my thought, anything controlled by the government is not a good thing. Look at healthcare. Perfect example. If we allow the government to take over bail, to take over the commercial bail system and reform it, and it becomes pretrial services is what they call it, and it's taxpayer pretrial services. Look at New Jersey, for example. They're broke. You got to have new DAs. You've got to have new public defenders. You've got to pay pretrial services workers. You have to pay these police officers to go out and serve all these failure to appear warrants. They don't have time for that. These guys are out, risking their lives every day. At the end of the day, the taxpayer is going to foot the bill. And it's going to cost a whole lot more under taxpayer-funded pretrial services than it does under the commercial bail system. Because what we do is done at zero cost to the taxpayer.
Which is, I think, one of the arguments that when you don't ever start there, but you usually end there when you're going back and forth with somebody.
Oh, yeah.
And it's hard to refute that. That is a valid point that, it costs us nothing on the front end of that. If it is working correctly, mm-hmm. and everyone is doing what they're supposed to do, from you to the accused to the system, mm-hmm. it is zero cost to us.
Even if they don't do what they're supposed to do and they fail to appear, it's still zero cost to the taxpayers. Why? Because we have people out here that are working and they're picking these people up and we're paying them out of our pocket. The taxpayer's not paying them to bring them back to court to be held accountable.
Now, what is the risk to society on a nonviolent criminal? Somebody who, let's say a DUI.
The risk to society, there are no victimless crimes, first of all.
Oh, sure there are. Possession of marijuana, possession of any other recreational drug. The victim is the individual, and as you know,
but so there is no victimless crime because the victim is the individual.
Right, but the government is not there to govern. You can't be the victim of your own actions. I mean, it's your decisions. I mean, there absolutely are victimless crimes because it's if I've got a sack of weed in my pocket and I get picked up, who's the victim?
You are.
Of what?
Listen, have you ever dealt with addiction? Because I've dealt with addiction in my family.
My brother died last month of an overdose.
There you go.
And I still say that drugs should be legal. Because
listen,
no law protected him.
Listen, and I couldn't agree with you more. I've dealt with addiction in my family, and it was something that was out of that person's control. They could not control their actions. They were addicted, and they were a victim of their own circumstances. So we have to agree to disagree on that point.
Sure. And look, he didn't look like a junkie. He died with a Rolex on his arm.
Yeah.
And they worked on him longer than they would have somebody who looked like a junkie, I'm sure, because he was, not DNA is something. He's a fat guy who didn't look skinny and strung out, but he was a victim of his own actions. And again, if I get popped with a sack of weed in my pocket, there's no victim. I'm not the victim of smoking weed. There's no harm to anybody.
We have to agree to disagree on that, like I said, because, after and you've lived with it too, and I've lived with addiction. Not only are they the victims of their own circumstances, but their families are victims as well. I consider, listen, I suffered many years with it. So, it's just a point we have to disagree on. But it's a horrible thing to go through. And that's a whole other subject for a whole other day.
Oh, sure. And that's a subject, and that's a subject for where government should be placing laws.
Yes.
But when you say there's no victimless crimes, I've known a lot of people who've gotten popped for stupid stuff. And sometimes the stupid stuff is their mouth.
That's true.
If they would shut up, they would have gotten popped.
You have to think about when all this bail reform rumbling started years back. The plan was that they were going to eliminate cash bail for misdemeanor crimes. Okay, and listen, am I 100% against that? No, about 99.9. But the reason being that there are some crimes that are, PUI or disorderly conduct or, somebody's jaywalking. Things, listen, I understand. But here's what's happened. It's snowballed. And they are now releasing rapists, child molesters, people accused of bestiality. People with violent crimes are now being released with nothing more than a pinky promise that says, thank you so much. I'll see you in court next month. And guess what happens? They don't come back to court. Bail reform people are touting that they have 95% return rates. But yet when we ask for the data, they can't prove it. The bail industry has a 98% return rate with data that we can prove because they are coming to court one way or the other. They can come of their own accord, or we can bring them to court.
Are you saying, and this is my own, I'm definitely not an expert on this topic, but are you saying that when you get rid of cash bail, there's nobody to go get them and bring them in because we just don't have the resources to do it?
Exactly. And listen, you have to look at your local law enforcement. Talk to the sheriffs. Talk to your police chiefs. They're going to tell you they're overloaded. They have more than they can do. So who's going to do it? Pretrial services workers work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. They don't work weekends, and they don't answer the phone at 5 o'clock. So who's going to do it?
Are there things that you feel like, I get that you're against it. I get that. But are there things you feel like could be improved?
Oh, absolutely. There's always room for improvement in any system. I don't want to go too much into that because I don't want to get slammed through my industry, but I believe that we need better regulations in the bail industry. And
that's interesting. You don't hear that. You don't hear that often. And
that's not to say Georgia's a great state. Georgia has some of the best bail laws in the country, but there are other states that need regulation.
You feel like Georgia's laws protect the bail industry and the individual?
I do. Our laws are very strict. They're very good. We have a wonderful state organization that oversees what we do. And we answer to our sheriffs. We're not like a lot of other states that are regulated by Department of Insurance. We work at the pleasure of the sheriff. And if he doesn't want us there, then we don't work. So we have to do the right thing.
Can you elaborate on that, please?
Like
in the county as a whole?
Mm-hmm. To be approved in a county to write bail, you must be approved by the sheriff of that county.
I did not know that.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you know that, Dave?
I did not.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting.
There are a lot of states, and Florida's one. I don't know. There's so many different laws in so many different states, but Florida is one state that Louisiana's another. You go through Department of Insurance for licensing and appointments. You're appointed by a surety company and underwritten by them, and you simply file your power of attorney in each county or each parish that you're going to write in, and it's done. In Georgia, you apply in each individual county to the sheriff, and each sheriff in each county has different rules and regulations. So if you're not pleasing your sheriff, you won't be writing bail.
That's scary in of itself.
I think it works. I think it's a good thing, and I'm going to tell you why. Because it keeps our Georgia bail agents we know we got to do the right thing. We have to do the right thing.
Well, I'm in a regulated industry also. I own an HVAC company. So, yeah, you won't hear many HVAC guys going, yeah, we definitely need Secretary of State to be more involved.
Yeah, I'm not for government control by any shape, form, or fashion. I do think we need some better regulations in some states. Not in every state, because 90% of the states that are bail states in the United States have great laws. Are there some that need some improvement? Absolutely. Georgia's got great bail law. And most of our states, Louisiana's great, Florida's great, North Carolina, South Carolina, New York, although they're having some serious issues with bail reform. Almost every state in the United States that allows commercial bail has great bail laws, with the exception of a few.
In the areas where they have adopted new policies, or even if it's just like at the municipal level, how long, from what you've seen, how long is it taking for those effects to be seen? Is it, because our last guest, Marc Hyden, one of his comments was, the city of Atlanta has seen a negligible decline in people showing up to court, but theirs literally took effect like three or 4 months ago. Like, it hasn't been anything. And I like trends. Like, I like to look at a year when I look at information. I don't like to look at. So what is your, how long would something like this take to have an impact and it on your premise, drive up costs and alter the community?
Not long. And I'm going to say, especially on the municipal side, because your municipal court cases tend to be dispositioned within 60 days, more or less. Atlanta, for example, it took them about 60 days to start seeing a massive amount of failure to appears. And, they've now closed the jail in Atlanta. There is no Atlanta City Jail. And Fulton County Jail is now overloaded. They have no room to house newly accused people because of the massive amounts of failure to appears from the city of Atlanta. So, for example, if you go to Buckhead, which is, a great area, I'm sure you know Buckhead, Jessica.
Oh, yes.
If you go to Buckhead and you're arrested, or you are accused of shoplifting at a store in Buckhead, and they call for the local police department, they don't even respond anymore. You're simply giving a trespass saying, don't come back in the store.
Well, that's the case in several places, one being Peachtree City, which we have nailed on this show. And for a completely different reason, is they want to keep their crime rates down. So there was a concerted effort to ignore petty crimes because they wanted to keep their crime rates down to keep their property values up.
Yeah, well, it's not good for business, I can certainly tell you. It's certainly not good for public safety because, people start out shoplifting and then they move up and graduate to armed robbery and things like that. So,
oh no, when I was a young man, if a store caught you shoplifting, they didn't call the police. You went in the back room and boxes fell on you.
Mm-hmm. And what we have to look at now in cases like that, especially with all of this bail reform, is something I look at every day are recidivism rates. Repeat offenders. I have a good dear friend up in New Jersey, Miss June. Her son, Christian Rogers, was murdered a couple of years ago by a man that was released on a OR, a signature bond, pretrial bond, whatever they call it up in New Jersey now. They don't have bail anymore. He had been arrested, I think, 25 times prior on weapons charges.
Holy.
And they gave pretrial services, used their risk assessment, and he was rated a low risk based on his arrest history. He was released, and I believe it was 2 days later that he shot and killed Christian Rogers in the street. Didn't know him from Adam, never seen him before. Shot and killed him. This is happening every day. That's recidivism. They're in and out, catch and release. And law enforcement, talk to your local law enforcement. They'll tell you they're sick of it.
Well, and we hear the exact opposite from the other side is the longer someone spends time in jail, the more likely they are to reoffend.
No, not true. The numbers are there. Recidivism rates are through the roof. It's catch and release, catch and release. It's the same people over. And listen, I can tell you just from my job and what I do, and, you know, I don't write a lot of bail anymore. My agents write for me, but I'm a control freak. So I'm always in my bail system. I'm always looking at paperwork being entered, watching what my girls are doing. And it's the same people over and over and over and over again. So there's no lesson being learned. It's just they're in and out. So can you imagine? And that's with accountability. Can you imagine with no accountability and you just walk in and let's say you just beat your wife to a pulp and you walk in and they go, oh, shame on you. All right, now I need you to be in court next month, okay? And you go, okay, pinky promise. Guess what? There's no consequences for your actions. So what are you going to do? You're going to do it again because it's easy.
Well, if we were following the speedy trial, they would get their day in court faster. Now, we use the extreme examples, but these folks have not been convicted of anything. And released back into a free society.
But here's what you've got to remember. You've got to remember, number one, probable cause, and number two, judicial discretion. Bail reform takes away judicial discretion. It takes it away from your judges. And you got to keep in mind that this is what these judges are paid to do. They make tough decisions based on probable cause, on the evidence, and after hearing from both defense and the prosecutor.
Well, and that goes back to how good of a defense can you afford?
But there's something else that's coming. Because all of these groups that are touting bail reform, the ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, the Vera Foundation, I can't even remember their name. I get so upset. But anyway, here we go. Let me calm down. These people, not only are they coming for bail, and I've told all my lawyer friends, and I hope they're all listening. Not only are they coming for the bail industry, they're coming for the legal industry as well because they believe in public defenders. They are against private attorneys. They want everyone to be released on pretrial services and assigned a public defender. And we talk about people being innocent until proven guilty. Pretrial services forces these people before they've been convicted to submit to drug testing. They force them to do counseling for anger management, domestic violence. These people haven't been convicted of anything yet.
That's a fair point too. I mean,
how are you going? How am I going to? If I beat up my husband last night and I get released on pretrial services and they say, all right, you got to go domestic violence counseling and come and take a drug test every week. Well, I haven't been convicted of anything. I'm innocent until proven guilty, right?
Unless, but yes. Sorry.
Unless what?
No. That's a callback to a previous show from Matt Lowe. It's guilty unless he corrected me and put me in my place.
Oh, okay.
It's a callback to a previous show. Sorry.
I must have missed that one.
Yeah, Matt enjoys correcting me.
Oh, well, that's okay.
In fact, someone last week said that I was Matt Lowe. I was like, do our voices even sound the same?
I love it.
but you're right though about. I mean, I think that's an aspect of people don't consider as what you give up for pretrial services. There is a trade-off. I mean, there's a trade-off with all of these quote solutions.
But you got to think about too, though. Preventative detention, because holding somebody on a no bail, which is preventative detention, that's a slippery slope. Because it's one thing to allow detention like that in capital cases like murder and rape and things like that. And it's another thing to allow judges broad power to simply detain at will.
Well, and that's something that we didn't have enough time to get into on the last one, and we're running close on this one. But I think the argument from the pro-reform side is that, if it's either or, they'll just release everybody.
Well, case in point.
But
New Jersey, Jessica.
But the opposite of that is they don't release people. Like, the people who are advocating for people to be out, like if no bond is set, or if the bond is deliberately set too high, they'll just be crimes where there is no bond is what will happen. And that's the opposite effect of what they're trying to do. I don't think they're looking. I mean, I didn't really think about it until we had this conversation either.
Mm-hmm. It's just like New Jersey. You can think about them. They're locking up and throwing away the key to over 8,000 defendants a year since they passed bail reform. When the options are simply release for free or detain, that's the result you get. People are locked up, and it has nothing to do with the bail industry. We don't set bail. We're not judge nor jury. We simply facilitate release with accountability to the court system.
I don't want anything that we said here to be misconstrued as against the bail industry or any industry for that matter. It's a question of government and what government should be doing is really where I know Jessica and I are certainly is not hammering an industry, but questioning the policies of government.
Right. Well, if you reform if the industry is, quote, a problem in the minds of some people right now because of the way the government set up the system. Mm-hmm. I mean, so, and I again, we didn't get to this question with our other guests, but my question was, what, as an advocate, what would you tell all the people who are employed by this industry? How do you justify it to them? That is my question.
Bail has served the courts and the public for centuries. It gives those charged with criminal offenses the option to choose a third-party personal surety. And bail agents satisfy this role with a fixed rate controlled by the state. So you got to ask yourself, why would you want to be monitored pre-trial by the very government trying to prosecute you? Because I don't.
I think we should end your segment with that because that's a pretty good statement.
Yeah, that is perfect. I want to thank you very much for coming on. And
thank y'all for having me.
And putting up with my hard-headedness.
No, you're great. I love talking because I can agree to disagree with you, and I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a great lesson for everybody that you can have a difference of opinion.
Sure.
And it's fine.
Listen, we don't all have to agree. I mean, we can all learn something from each other. And listen, I'm so sorry about your brother.
Thank you very much. It was recent and happened, and
I'm very sorry.
Well, I appreciate it.
I'm very sorry.
Well, but thank you for your insight. It was tremendous, and I think, like I said, an insight that most of us probably, thankfully, will never have to experience. I might be a little bit closer than Dave.
Yeah, I think you're going to get there eventually. I do believe.
Oh, you're going to state court.
Yeah, it's going to be some trumped up, McGovern yourself crap. But yeah, it's coming. I see it coming.
Well, thank you.
But I got you. Don't worry, I got you.
I'm so thankful for you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, y'all, for having me. Have a great night.
You too. I want to thank both our guests for coming on today, offering their opposing views, and oddly enough, where they agree and their views kind of merge together.
Yeah, after listening to them so close together and talking with them, it's interesting that they somewhat share the same goal, which is the taxpayer aspect. I mean, both sides really feel like they're doing what's in the best interest of all the parties involved and the taxpayers who are ultimately footing the bill of the justice system. So it was definitely an interesting show.
And I think we accomplished our goal with...
Well, obviously.
Yeah, well, obviously. Being able to have a discussion with opposing viewpoints without getting into hyperbole and name calling and everything else that goes on with national politics, because I think we all have the same goal, which is a safe community, taking burdens off the taxpayers, as you said, and being fair to those who are accused. And I think since we have those things in common, we can certainly move forward with this.
I think that some of the bigger moves in America are going to be made right here on this show. Just stick with us. We're only on episode 74. We're just getting started.
Well, let's get into closing thoughts. We're running long. Jessica? My
only closing thought this week is I'm celebrating an anniversary I've been in South Georgia for 4 years now, which is crazy to think about. And mostly because no one thought I could do it. I didn't think I could do it either. I thought I'd be going back. But, so yeah, I've celebrated 4 years away from Target, Whole Foods, and traffic.
I'm envious. My closing thought is, last week, Trump made an unforced error. Stop it.
Get back in your box.
Get back in your box. Stop making somebody, and this is something I said the first time I was on the show, and I think is when I came on with, actually this time last year when you were gone for vacation. Put an adult in the room with Trump before he sends a tweet. Jesus. It was so nice watching the left eat themselves. And Trump woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and says, hey, they're not talking about me. Let me say something stupid. Stop it. So, we're running long. Thank you very much for listening this long. If you like what you heard, please go and like and share us on social media. Please give us feedback. Limit the criticisms to 3 lines. That's the rule in the show. And we will do our best to ignore you. So, for Jessica Szilagyi, I'm Dave Roberts. Have a great week.